Yeah, we have an understanding of conflict that as long as there's only one winner in every conflict, then I agree we need to get rid of that thing happening, right? My understanding of conflict is it's not resolved until there are two winners.
Welcome to Linda's Corner. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about conflict resolution. I'm delighted to welcome Kristine Scott. Kristine is a nationally recognized trainer and speaker on conflict management. She is also the chief trainer and owner of Seattle Conflict Resolution. You can reach Kristine at her website, seattleconflictresolution.com, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Welcome, Kristine. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you so much, Linda.
I am delighted to have this conversation, and you and I had an opportunity to put into practice some conflict resolution. We actually could not have planned it any better. In trying to get together today, we had just a series of unfortunate events and some miscommunications that could have led to conflict. But instead, it was quickly resolved, and it was actually not a big deal at all. So let's walk our listeners through what happened and what we did, what you did, what I did, and then what could have happened. Because I think,
Mhm.
again, I think it's just amazing that we have an opportunity to say, okay, we're doing this for real. We're not just talking the talk, we can walk the walk. So, as we put together a schedule, and I have an invitation for a podcast for a Zoom link. And then a few days ago, I received a message of rejection saying, "Oh, your offer has been rejected, and for being out of town." And I thought, "Oh, okay." So I went ahead and canceled everything and cleared my schedule out to do something else. And then I sent a message saying, "Oh, I understand that you needed to cancel because you're out of town, and that's okay, and whatever." And then you responded and said, "No, actually, I was planning to be there." And then we rescheduled and put it back together. But there were a few things that took place that I think we did well. And there are some things where maybe I could have even done better. And one is when you responded to me, if it had been reversed, and I had been saying, "Oh, no, this was just a miscommunication," and explained, actually, my computer did an auto response. I didn't even send that message. And I would have said, "I'm sorry, and here's what happened." You took it a step further, and you included a kind of a something where you thought, way that I might have responded, the way I might have thought or might have felt, where you said, "That must have been frustrating to schedule it and then to have it be deleted like that." And I thought, I don't think I would have thought to add that little tidbit. So is that one of your tips, is to kind of recognize where someone else is coming from?
Exactly, exactly. And underneath that all, another thing both of us did right is we didn't assume this other person was out to do us wrong.
Mm,
It's really easy because of all of the messages and insecurities that we carry around. When somebody does something that we don't like, it's really easy to like assign intent. Like, oh,
right.
they did that because blah, 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 blah. And whatever we see or feel about ourselves just gets magnified in this one little bad news.
And isn't that fascinating? Where the real problem, if I did that, if I assumed, "Wow, she rejected me, that was really rude," I could have been all upset and all of this, and I could have been thinking, "Man, she is such a jerk," when the real problem would have been my assumptions. And
Mhm.
the problem would have been with me. And then if I had reacted and, "Well, you're a jerk because I scheduled this time and you didn't want to show up." And then you could have responded, "Oh, yeah, well, blah, 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 blah." And then it could have gone big, 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 when in actuality, there really wasn't anything to resolve. It was
Nope.
just, computer error. Let's fix it. No big deal.
Hmm. Hmm.
So awesome. Well done. Very well done. Awesome. Well, is it okay if we start with well, not really start because we talked about our experience, but go back to where you first decided to work in conflict resolution,
Hmm.
because it's not something that you always were super awesome at.
No, no. As a matter of fact, if you had told me 30 years ago that this is what I'd be doing, I would have thought it quite ridiculous. But I started out working in social services with young people who had no housing. And I was terrified. Frankly, this is not a group that I ever imagined working with. I came from a small town. I had a very privileged background, and I wasn't ready at all for the chaos, the danger, and a lot of the posturing that comes with street culture. And I was I was frankly out of my league, and I kept on messing up terribly. Either coming into a conflicted situation with way too much aggression and authoritarian energy, or way too much passivity, just like letting these young people walk all over me. And I couldn't figure out like why do I only have two settings? Why am I only doing one of these two things? And neither one of them works, by the way. Um, And then I started learning more about my biology and watching how they handled conflicted situations because their lives were on the lines every day. And what I realized is that their threat assessor was much more accurate than my own. My threat assessor was going off constantly. All somebody had to do was look at me the wrong way, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, danger, danger," right? Whereas for them, they knew the difference between what a real risk was and what was just posturing, what was just kind of street chaos.
Wow, that's a fascinating distinction. So, as you're talking and you're putting this in such gentle terms, these are people without housing, where we would say homeless. We're on the street. We are dealing with absolute survival situations. And you were, how old were you at the time?
I was in my 20s at the
And
time
you're
that I started this this crazy endeavor.
Well, you're young and you don't have a lot of experience, and here you're in this position of authority when you really haven't earned their respect, so to speak, and trying to what were you trying to get them to do? Can you give us kind of what a conflict would look like or feel like in this situation?
Well, my AmeriCorps position was being in charge of a meal program. So ultimately, the goal was for 1 hour, I would be in some church basement offering food to young people who were often struggling with malnourishment. So it seems like a very straightforward mission, but it included things like breaking up fights, asking people to leave who were no longer welcome, enforcing rules of what basic respect within the program looked like. And so there were a lot of places, like you say, as somebody who didn't understand their culture and who hadn't earned their trust, that I had no leg to stand on to like make these requests of people.
Wow, that would be extremely challenging because for most of us, we hope or assume a basic level of civility and of honor and respect between individuals. And when we don't get that, and then we have to stand up for it, that's really hard to do unless you revert back to physical force or to like a verbal assault kind of a thing. And
Yep.
those are things that people often resort to because, I mean, what else do you do?
Mm-hmm.
So now that you've had a little bit more skill, I mean, maybe can you give us an example of what you did do and what you would have done now?
Well, I started allowing the young people to be my teachers. So first off, I threw out the threat assessor. I realized I was a lot safer than my body was telling me. So that we all have this biology that's running our fight, flight, freeze system. And once that gets triggered, for about 20 minutes, we're convinced that something must happen to protect our own well being. Like, assuming that you don't get further triggered or stimulated, you have at least 20 minutes of behaving poorly in one of those two modes, right? Very aggressive or very avoidant. Um, so once I threw that out and got past that and learned how to sidestep that, then I could start actually leaning into this crisis or conflict at hand without that taking over. And that allowed me to actually be curious about this other person and start asking questions about like, okay, so this is the situation. What's your understanding of that rule? What does that rule mean for you? Oh, well, this is just a stupid rule that you guys made up. Okay, well, let me tell you more about why this rule is here. And now that you understand that this is a rule that the whole street community has agreed on for their safety, and I'm just the messenger, what do you want to do going forward? So then it's not about me as the enforcer, it's about me as the like, okay, here's a disconnect in how I think things are supposed to go and how you think things are supposed to go. Let's be curious about that disconnect. Just kind of like we had this disconnect with the scheduling, right? Like let's be curious about this disconnect as opposed to assuming, oh, this person's out to get me.
And obviously, or I guess obvious is not the correct word, most likely that is what they're feeling is you
Mm-hmm.
are threatening me and you
Mm-hmm.
are trying to boss me around and it's not fair. And we have a desire to be treated fairly. We have a desire to be treated with respect. We have a desire to be seen. And when you are treating it in this way of, let's be curious about this, what
Mm-hmm.
is your understanding? Let
Mm-hmm.
me explain. And then you're automatically letting this person be heard.
Yes.
And being heard and being seen is critical to our survival. And I love that you mentioned that the first thing in trying to handle any kind of conflict is to deal with our survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, we can't be thinking clearly and rationally and be engaged when we are in that fear mode,
Yes.
because our primary motivation then is, I am protecting me. That's my number one concern. All
Mm-hmm.
y'all can deal with whatever else, but it's misguiding when it is overreactive. And how
It is.
fascinating that you were able to learn that from people who were dealing with real situations and
Mm-hmm.
understand real threats. Very well done. Very well done.
Well, I owe a debt of gratitude to the young people that I served. And so you just nicely summarized what I call the three rings of conflict resolution. The first one is the clarity about myself, right? Around what's my body doing? Can I sidestep the survival stuff? And what's my role? What do I need in this situation? Right? That's the first inner circle. And then the next outer circle is that curiosity that we talked about. Okay, so what's going on with this person? I might not have the facts right about um, why Kristine canceled our podcast today, or like I might not have like I'm curious like what's going on here. Okay, and that's the next circle, and then the circle after that is compassion, where you take what you've learned about this person and you provide it with the compassion it needs to grow and for trust to build between the two of you. And so what I did with the young people is I was very articulate about the last thing I want to do is do anything that threatens your access to food. Because there was a big power imbalance between my role and their role in the situation. And by naming that, I could show that I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. Like I want young people to have access to food. So let's name that imbalance and show you that I want compassion to be like the final part of our conversation. And people really got that. Especially right now, we have a lot of social uprising going on around women's rights and the rights of people of color and all of these things. And we have to have compassion and name places that inequity are creating more tension than needs to be there.
And isn't that true? It's creating more tension than needs to be there. So all of the conflict isn't necessary. And sometimes people, I think, get a little confused that the conflict is necessary to be able to be heard
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to get what I want. And yet, by turning it around and showing the compassion and increasing our mutual understanding, we have a greater possibility of being heard,
Mm-hmm.
being understood. Because often when we're in a verbal match, we're fighting, we don't listen very well.
Yes.
Because what I'm doing is I'm trying to protect myself. I'm trying to be heard, and I can speak louder. I can speak, but I'm not paying attention to listening. And guess what? The other person is doing the same thing.
Mhm.
And as long as they feel threatened, then the shields go up and the ears shut off.
Yeah, we have an understanding of conflict that as long as there's only one winner in every conflict, then I agree we need to get rid of that thing happening, right? My understanding of conflict is it's not resolved until there are two winners. So if you and I go through this conflicted situation, and at the end of it, we have an increase in trust and communication and understanding towards each other, then it's been resolved. And then this thing won't happen again because of the work we did. And a lot of times, I encourage people to take two things away from each conflict you have. One is, what have I learned from myself? Like, where are my unhealed wounds and insecurities getting hooked in to this conflict? So, go do your own work. And number two, what is it about this person that I can learn from and appreciate? And if we do that, then all of that raw, big emotional vulnerability energy that comes up in a conflict is actually harnessed for good because we have to be uncomfortable to learn. When was the last time you changed anything about yourself just for the fun of it?
Isn't that the sad truth? I love that the goal is a win-win outcome. And I feel like if I know that your motive is a win-win outcome, then that means you want me to win, and I'm all in.
Mhm.
But it is if you win, then I lose. I don't, I'm going to play rough.
Right.
Or I'm going to avoid it and get walked all over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's the way conflict typically plays out, unfortunately, is that it's more like this hierarchy, this totem pole version of conflict, which is just unfortunate.
Yes, it is unfortunate. And I think it is so important to help increase the awareness and the skill set that you bring to the table today. So I would love to learn some more things. Let's say I'm a person who, my whole life I've just been conflict avoidant because I don't want to go there. I hate conflict. I just want peace. How can I work with that? How can I stand up for myself? And now I got walked all over.
Well, the first thing we talked about is that inner self, right? Like what's going on with my body right now? There are some things we can do to sidestep that biological takeover that happens when our amygdala tells our body, "Oh my gosh, this is very threatening. Fight, flight, freeze. Time for all the adrenaline, all the cortisol to start coursing through our bodies." Like there's something we can do before that happens. The first thing that we need to do is look at my assessment of the situation. Is it really as big and overwhelming as I think it is? And if I feel overwhelmed, even though the situation's not overwhelming, I'm gonna just take five. I'm gonna say, wow, that's a really good question you just asked me. Can I get back to you? And
Oh,
the moment you carve out even 5 minutes for yourself, or even whatever parameter, like, oh, you know what? I could give you my undivided attention, but I only have 10 minutes. Is that okay? Like once you set parameters on your capacity to engage with this other person, you have just sidestepped your body's message that I'm a cornered animal right now because you've asserted your boundaries around how you're going to engage, when you're going to engage. By setting the terms and the timing, you are no longer cornered. So that's the number one hack that I have for people. The number two hack is take all of those situations that you're avoiding and just list them out, like those difficult conversations, the feelings you have about your sister-in-law, like the whole list. Just give yourself permission to be brutally honest, write them out, and then kind of go through and rank them from the easiest to the hardest. And on the easy ones, I encourage people just start thinking about what's the barrier? What's the message? What is my biggest fear? Because oftentimes those places that we're not feeling so great about ourselves or something that we've done are opportunities for us to continue the conflict because we don't really want to admit that we behaved badly towards our sister-in-law, right? We might just like want to kick that can down the road than to bring that ugliness out into light. So whatever it is that's creating that difficulty, just give yourself permission, like, okay, is that something I can be honest about? Is that something that I want to talk to them about? And start working on those easier ones and untangling those. And I noticed the more I did this, the more I leaned into people that I thought just had it out for me. 90% of the time, they actually harbored no ill will in my direction. They might have been wondering why I checked out or why I'd been behaving weirdly in their direction, but they weren't thinking badly of me. I was the one that was carrying this weight around for no apparent reason other than being conflict avoidant.
Wow. That is so amazing and very empowering. And
Mhm.
also, it requires some change and some internal assessment, which can be challenging. But
Yes.
it's so fascinating with every challenge that we have to deal with any other person. It always comes back to checking in with myself first.
Hmm.
I don't get to change the whole world except for me. I
Yes.
actually don't have the power to change the whole world except for me. The only one I have power to change is me.
Hmm.
When we work on ourselves, it can change how we feel with all of the different interactions that we have, and we're more successful in our interactions. I loved the hacks that you gave, something specific that I can do to set some parameters, and they were pretty easy. It's like, wow, good question. Can I get back to you in 5 minutes? Or I'd love to talk about this. I only have 10 minutes. One, put it out just a little bit so that I can pull myself together. One, put it in a box that said, I have an escape. In 10 minutes, I'm going to do something else. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I loved it so much. And when you brought up the point that we have to be able to be humble enough, we didn't use that word, but I think that's what it is, to recognize that we can be, and probably have been, part of the problem, all of a sudden, we also can be part of the solution.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's really, really important to be able to recognize when it's just our pride on the line. And that's the only thing I'm worried about. That's then my safety equals my pride. If you hurt my pride, you hurt my safety. And it doesn't turn out very well.
It doesn't. And I remind people that that little thing that happens in our brain, that little gland that releases all of the adrenaline and the cortisol, it can't tell the difference between a threat to your life and a threat to your pride. It will release the same exact hormones if your pride is injured. And so even though it feels like you're about to die, just give yourself permission to be curious, like, what's this coming from? Right? Yeah.
And I don't feel like my life is threatened, or at least I can be curious about what it is that's threatening,
Hmm.
or that I
Hmm.
feel is threatening my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. And apply that kindness to yourself first because you can't give it to somebody else until you have it for you.
Oh, marvelous. So we get to and really need to have compassion for ourselves. And that was part of your step of understanding someone else is to
Hmm.
have compassion for them. We
Hmm.
can also have compassion for ourselves.
Yep.
And I love how you put this into really quite some physiological terms. So my pride doesn't need to be at stake that my body has a process. I mean, it is what it is.
Yep.
So I can be compassionate with myself with that this is
Hmm.
my reaction. And then I can be curious about it and see if I can find a better way.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And when you come up against those unhealed wounds that conflict always is pointing out, like, oh, this is how you feel about a man yelling at you, for example. And for women, this is just really hard because this is a thing that we've been socialized that Well, men are the ones that protect and women are the ones that appease. And even if we don't believe, these gender norms, we've still been socialized in a world that supports and reinforces them. And so I remind women, you have also been encouraged to develop your intuition and your sense of responsibility for the well-being of others. And conflict is essentially about that. Resolving conflict is about the well-being of others. And you have an advantage in conflict that men don't have, in that we're very rarely seen physically to be intimidating or to be a threat of any possible future where this conflict becomes physical, which is also not true, but that's what a lot of people believe. And when I was running social service programs, I ran not just meal programs, but a shelter and a group home for people who were behaviorally violent. And what I realized is that I could get in close into situations that a man would have never been able to. Because again, I was not seen as a physical threat. So I could create a conversation with somebody that would allow them to save face with this other person, this other combatant, and break up fights in a way that a man never could because he would just have been seen as another combatant.
That's amazing. So now you're offering, what I'm hearing is some specific advice for women who may be conflict avoiding because they want to have that contention, and to look at it in a new light, that we can be peacemakers. And creating peace. Oh, that's a noble goal. I can go for that.
Yeah.
That matches my feminine nature. Okay. So being a peacemaker and resolving conflict can be the same thing.
Yeah, in my mind, that's exactly what it's about. That's why I call myself a conflict resolutionary, because what I want people to do is revolutionary, is leaning in when our culture has trained us to lash out or to go get somebody big and scary to lash out for us.
And those are some of our knee-jerk responses, because we have to have a winner.
Yep.
But if we can have a win-win situation, oh, wouldn't that be lovely? You have such important things to share. I can't think of a more important message that our world needs, is peace. Guys, we want peace, right? World peace. We could be on a beauty pageant. I want world peace. How do you get world peace? Resolving your conflicts.
Yes.
Fantastic. Oh, Kristine, you're amazing. Is there anything that you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
I just want to encourage people to be gentle with themselves. This is like any other new skill. It takes time. You can't be a public speaker right away, and you can't be a conflict resolutionary right away. Just start with the easy things and the internal things and let it unfold from there and stay at it. You will make many, many mistakes, and that's okay. It really is a part of the growth and the learning.
Oh, thank you for permission to make a mistake, because I do it all the time.
Yes.
Oh, I appreciate so much you visiting with me today.
Thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks. In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Thomas Crum. He said, "The quality of our lives depends not on whether or not we have conflicts, but on how we respond to them." Today, I invite our listeners to improve the way we respond to conflict. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Linda's Corner, please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. I also invite you to check out my nonprofit, Hope for Healing, at the website hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free ebooks and other free resources to help increase happiness, build confidence and self-esteem, strengthen relationships, manage stress, and calm feelings of depression and anxiety. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, or Amazon bestseller, You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.